Hello and welcome to the final Radio Academy podcast of 2022. My name is Christian Hugill, and since February this podcast has taken a weekly look at the world of radio and audio. We give you new things to listen to, check in on brilliant projects and give you an insight as to how they made it to air. So after you've finished with this episode, maybe while you're driving home for Christmas or hiding when the time with the family's becoming a bit much, you know what I mean, do check out some of our previous episodes. Over the year, we've checked in with Radios 1, 2 and 3, BBC Local Radio, Kiss, Absolute, Fun Kids, Virgin, huge podcasts like My Dad Wrote a Porno, and loads more. So we obviously give you a lot of great stuff on this pod for free. You're welcome. But if you become a Radio Academy member for just £3 a month, you get even more, like access to all of our events and the content that comes with it. For example, the Radio Academy Festival. And as this is our last pod of the year, I've been given the honour of choosing my favourite Radio Academy moment of the last 12 months. And it was without question the amazing Michelle Visage. She is world famous for her role as a judge on RuPaul's Drag Race, both in the US and on BBC Three over here. But she is a radio gal through and through and has a predictably fascinating and colourful journey through the world of radio. So at the end of the summer, at the Radio Academy Festival, Michelle sat down with Stephanie Hirst to chat about her radio life, starting with how she fell in love with audio.
So I was a kid, obviously I grew up New York, New Jersey area in the United States, tri-state area, so it really is the number one radio market in the world. So for me, I had the freedom of listening to people like Howard Stern, who shaped who I was as a jock in New York when I started. But
WNBC.
WNBC, yeah. Don Imus was on there.
Imus in the morning.
95.5 WPLJ, Z100 was just starting. So I remember 95.5 PLJ when I was young had like a joke of the day. And they would tell you the joke at one time, and then a half an hour later, usually on a school run or something, they'd tell you the punchline. So if you didn't get the joke, you wouldn't get the punchline. And half the time I'd be in the car going, I don't understand this punchline.
But that would get them an extra tick in the diary, so they'd do it over the hour, so they would get an extra tick.
And I remember tuning, just listening. WABC would have less music than WNBC, and I really liked hearing the disco and the music like that. And I remember the first record that I ever bought, the first 45 that I ever bought with my money was With a Little Luck, We Can Make It. Paul McCartney and Wings. And the other one was The Gambler by Kenny Rogers. Like, it made me. It was like, what? These were records that impacted me because of the radio. The Devil Went Down to Georgia by Charlie Daniels. Who am I? I have no idea. But when you heard these songs on the radio, these are things that you felt like they were a part of pop culture. They were part of the canvas, and you needed to own them and needed to have them.
And they start to kind of build your eclectic taste in music. And did you always want to, because Seduction, you got to number 2 on Billboard in back end of January 1990, wasn't it? 89 was the first single. I think Two to Make It Right was in 1990. But Paula Abdul and An Animated Cat kept us out of number 1. I'm not bitter. Is that
very happy for Paula.
Opposites Attract.
That's the one.
MC Scrat Cat. That was it.
Yeah.
But get to number 2 on Billboard.
Yes.
What was your life like? What did that feel like at that point?
Well, I thought I was Madonna, obviously. My whole goal growing up listening to music and loving the radio, I remember I was not, this is going to make you sad, don't let it be sad. I was not a popular kid growing up, so I didn't have friends to go out with on New Year's Eve. I didn't do those things. I literally was the radio nerd who would sit home and listen to Z100. I would write down in a notebook all of the songs that were the top 100 to get to number 1. And I remember if my parents said, we're going to go out for dinner all together as a family, there'd be a big gap, like from 60 to 80, and I was like, no! So I'd come home and they'd loop it all over and again. I'd write them all down again until we got to number 1. So for me, radio was a huge part of my life. So all I ever wanted to be was a pop star. That's it. The Go-Go's was my first obsession and my first love, and the Sex Pistols, different story for a different day. I don't think I could ever be what Sid Vicious or Johnny Rotten was, but I could see myself like Belinda Carlisle. Yeah. And then Cyndi Lauper and Madonna came out, and it was over for me. That's all I ever wanted to do and be, or a veterinarian, but my mother steered me away from that because academia wasn't my thing. So I couldn't think of anything else, and I weirdly had parents who, when I said I wanted to be a veterinarian, and they said, well, what else would you want to be? I was like, an actress? And they were like, do that one. Weirdly, I had parents that supported that. I think she knew. So, yeah, I only ever wanted to be a pop star.
So the power of audio, the power of radio. Do you remember where you were when you heard your song on the radio?
Absolutely. I was in my apartment in New York City that I shared. We shared a one-bedroom apartment with 3 girls. So we each had like twin, single beds in one bedroom. And I remember having these, I grew up in the Harlem ballroom scene, what you would see on a TV show called Pose. That's my kind of induction into the LGBT family. And these kids would always come over and sleep on the floor. A lot of them didn't have places to stay. So I would let the girls have the bedroom, and then we'd sleep on the floor, and we'd be up all night. And once the record came out, I remember being there and just turning the radio on. I didn't know it was going to be on the radio, and I heard it for the first time. And it was just a moment of, I think my song is on. And it was on Hot 97. 97.1, which broke many a record. It used to be a dance station, and then it turned to hip-hop.
So your connection with radio goes way back.
Way back.
And then you end up actually working at WKTU with, this is where you start working with RuPaul, as we can see now.
So that was February of 96. I was, the record deal thing, we didn't sign a good record deal. It was a very bad record deal, worse than Supremes, worse than TLC, only we didn't have legs to stand on or money to fight it. So sadly, it ended the way it did. And I did a song on the Bodyguard soundtrack, which I wrote and I performed. It was the only non-Whitney song to make it into the movie.
Yes,
we brought it to Top of the Pops here, which, as we know, can make or break your career in one TV show, which is the weirdest thing I've ever heard of in my life. But it did have that power. And that was 92. And then at that point, it was like, I didn't know where to go because they dumped out on the record. I was signed to Arista. Clive Davis signed me. We finished this record, and then my producers got in a fight with Clive, and they never delivered the record. So the rest is unheard of. And supposedly the masters were lost in a flood. It's been a long road. But the point is, my best friend in New Jersey called me. I was living in Manhattan, and she said, they're playing your music on this new radio station. It's all of our music, which would be dance music from the late 80s, early 90s, right? Yeah. That whole movement of Mars, Pump Up the Volume, I can go on and on with that music, but you know what I'm talking about. Rock Me On, Amadeus, all those records.
Falco.
I know, all those records. And they were playing the dance music that I grew up on loving, that we would hear at clubs and teen nightclubs. And I called every single radio programmer that I met when I was in the girl group. Because at every radio station, radio has always fascinated me. So anytime Seduction did an interview, the girls would be like, we want to go home. We're stars. We don't do this. And I was like, can I do the traffic? So they would leave, and I would stick around to do traffic, weather, bits, anything I could do. I might have dated a boy here and there, and by dated, you know what I mean. Yeah. It was just a fun time in my life. I was 19 years old, 20 years old. So radio had always been super, super important to me. So when I had the opportunity to get a job on a radio station with absolutely zero radio experience, but I'm a hustler with a capital H. I was not taking no for an answer. I called every radio programmer. And ironically, because this was the biggest launch of any radio station in the past 20 years, every single programmer I called was like, oh, I'm going to be working there. Oh, I'm going to be the music director. Oh, not one of them had anything to do with it. And weirdly, I told my roommate, who was an exotic dancer at a place called Scores, and she said, I think my boss is going to be working at that radio station. And I was like, right, your boss at the strip club is going to be working at the radio station. And I actually went for a meeting at the strip club with these 2 guys who were like, and I was like, okay. And they actually they were going to audition. So they
in a strip club?
In a strip club, and they were going to audition for this 100,000-watt radio station. They were putting so much money into this stick. It was unbelievable. And what they did was called stunting in America. So they would audition for breakfast a week at a time with different personalities to see how the audience responded. And I started with the first one as a person out on the street. So I'd be like, hey, it's Michelle Visage at the Tesco. I'm giving away Radio 2 T-shirts. Come see me for the next half an hour. And if you say, I'll give you a free T-shirt. So it was that type of thing. And all the upper echelon were in town from Chicago. And they said, who's that girl? Yeah. Because I wasn't jaded or bitter or ruined by radio. Yeah. I wasn't what they wanted me to be. It's the truth, guys. So they brought me in the next week to be with somebody. And they said, we want you to do traffic with him. And I was like, cool. They said, you ever do traffic? I was like, yeah, a lot. So I was like just doing whatever I want. I remember there was a report of a car fire and I called it a carbecue and I was just doing all these things. No idea the levity of the situation, the gravitas. And I was like, but they loved it. And then the third one that came in had somebody he wanted to bring with him. So I was like, oh no, somebody's going to get my job. And then the fourth one, they wanted me back for the fourth. So this is week 4 of the stunting. And they bring us to a room and they said, you meet to see how it's going to go. And in walks RuPaul. And I had known Ru from the club days. And he looks at me, I look at him, it was Fashion Week, and we were going to be broadcasting live from the Fashion Cafe. And he looked at me and said, of course it's Michelle Visage. All roads lead to Visage. And that's where our career started. They put us together, and the first ratings book, we beat Howard Stern. Yep. Now, I didn't know this. So I was on a SAG-AFTRA salary. And I didn't know anything about money or anything about ratings, so I did that first year for like a potato, basically.
But you do when you first start out. You literally will work for nothing.
And I did.
Yeah. And then many stations follow, because I don't think a lot of people know this and the fact that they see you on Drag Race and on TV shows. But you're a radio person.
Just so you know, I'm not just a random American, and just so you know, because I see a lot of, bring back Tony Humphries. Let me tell you something right now. Tony ain't going anywhere. Tony is loved, okay? Gary is loved. They are major talent that we couldn't live without. My hat goes off to these people. But just so you're comfortable knowing, I have done only breakfast radio for 17 years. Through 2 pregnancies, yes. Through 2 C-sections, luckily I live in America, I got a week off for each baby.
Yeah,
2 C-sections.
You got a week off after each C-section.
Cut open, 1 week, here you go. Babies are right, yeah, that was
it. This is interesting, so how women will look. There was a thing years ago, and it doesn't exist anymore in this country, that research was once done that women don't like listening to other women on the radio.
Lies.
Apparently. Does anyone remember those days?
Lies.
What was it like for women in the US on the radio?
Babe, it's so much. Why do you think I'm on the radio here?
Really?
Well, I was the top female in my game. There's absolutely nobody that would take me down in mornings. I was a morning girl, right? I was feisty, I was in your face. A little bit rougher than Sarah, Zoe, but I love them both. But it's New York. You have to have that New York attitude, right? So radio, listen, you know this. Radio is in your blood.
Yeah.
And if you are a radio person, it's so hard to walk away, right? So when I decided to leave and just focus on television, it was not an easy decision.
Yeah.
And it was because women in America are treated terribly in radio. Name one person. You can't. We are not treated so. You can say Elvis Duran. You can talk about Ryan Seacrest. Maybe some people have heard of Delilah. Maybe. But not really.
But is it changing?
No. Absolutely not. That's why I live for radio in this country. It is freeing. It is wonderful. I get to play music that I pick. What is that? The music in the States is not only thoroughly, completely researched into the ground, but we have a playlist that rotates every hour. I'm not kidding, on CHR stations or top 40 stations. That's why I didn't mind doing adult contemporary. I've done urban, I've done it all. And I love all formats. I love all genres, I really do. And I could do it. When I fill in for Elaine Page, I get the biggest buzz. It's like musical theater, people that know me know that it's my life. So when I get to dep for her, it's like, I get so excited.
This is how you started it too, wasn't it? Just getting occasional deps.
I had to beg Helen, she knows. She's sitting right there. To literally beg. My fabulous manager and I were like, please, because I know hearing American voices, you're not as enamored with our accent as we are with yours. I'm very aware of that. So,
but you're dead good at accents.
Dead good is an extreme. I love a northern accent because I would be from the north. We know this. But it's fun. And I don't want anybody to think that I would ever make fun of it. Like, I really do live for this country, and the radio programming here is so wonderful. And the way they treat women and women in charge, like Helen, like Lorna, like yourself, like Sarah, like Zoe, all these incredible,
powerful, fierce women, especially at Radio 2 as well.
Correct. Well, now this is a new to me, a renaissance of radio too. I grew up, listening to my radio, and then I'd get in my car with Sirius XM, and I'd get to listen to Chris Moyles, and I would hear BBC Radio 1, and I would listen, and I would hear how differently they did radio versus the way we did it, and I would try to steal some bits of what Chris was doing and bring them to America.
Oh my gosh.
But weirdly, it didn't translate because my British sensibility didn't work so much in New York.
Because I forget that Radio 1 was on Sirius. I don't know whether it still is. I'm
going back years because I was on Sirius simultaneously with being on the radio in New York. So I'd get off my shift and then have to walk over to Sirius and track there.
Just very quickly, because I know we can talk all day, I've gone down to 0 on the clock.
Oh my God, it went that fast.
We've crashed the news and everything.
Okay.
I'm late for the ad break. I've missed a quarter. You have to re-cue it. Just very quickly, for radio, if you can sum up the power of radio in 5 words?
No, it's not going to be 5 words.
I love her.
Radio is something that is a gift. That is something we all take for granted. Every one of us, even us in the industry, we all take it for granted because it's always been there and it always will be there. And you're not paying a monthly thing to get it. It's just there. And when you listen to these people that are on your radio, they do it because they love to be in your ear, in your home, in your heart, with you, sharing everything. The biggest compliment I could ever get from anybody was when girls, women especially, who would come up and say, you know what? I feel like listening to you is like listening to my sister or my best friend. That means what you're doing is touching them in the very soul. And they feel like whatever you say is like gospel to them.
It's
Relatable, real, comfortable. So in your own home, that's how I want people to feel. In their car, that's how I want people to feel, like they're sitting with their best friend or their sister. So radio to me is the heart. That's where it all is. And that's where it always will be. And we have to love what we have in this medium. It's not easy. We do it because we love it. Because we are the unspoken... Okay, now I'm not going to say heroes. That's a little dramatic. With the NHS and everything that's going on. Yeah. We're the unspoken talent in the showbiz. We're the outliers. Nobody looks at us. We're on the fringes. But really, we're the heart.
I was in the audience for that chat, and Michelle had everyone eating out the palm of her hand. She is a legend, and I loved hearing about her radio journey. She's one of us, my friends. She's a proper radio person. Now, you can hear Michelle on Radio 2, Friday nights from 7. She also presents Michelle Visage's Rule Breakers, where she sits down for a one-to-one encounter with some of her favourite divas, rebels and rule breakers. And we are so grateful to her for coming on to the festival and having a chat earlier in the year. As I say, you can get so much stuff like that by becoming a Radio Academy member, plus access to events, career tips, networking advice and loads more. Just search Radio Academy membership. Right, you have a lovely Christmas, and we will kick off the Radio Academy podcast in style in 2023 with a massive name. I'm not going to tell you who, but here's a clue. His career has taken him to space, via fighting robots, and a spell on the cobbles of Coronation Street. That is before we even get started on his long radio career. Very much excited to talk to you then. That's out on the 4th of January. Thanks for listening to us this year, and a very Merry Christmas.